Welcome to G-Spot, the podcast. I am your host, Gina Swire, international expander to humans, best-selling author of P.S. I Love Me, kink, eros, and business activator, and your favorite DJ G-Spot. I'm on a mission to explore the intersection between consciousness, kink, transformation, and humor, unlocking pleasure and liberating souls along the way. This podcast is for anyone ready to step into their sexual liberation, personal transformation, and fullest expression, all whilst having a wild and hilarious time. Yay! Okay, so welcome everybody to another juicy episode, extremely juicy today, with the gorgeous Cleo and Jo. And I had this idea a few weeks ago. I just had this spark moment where I was like, oh, we have to get together as a threesome and record this podcast with a specific intention. And of course, we'll be flowing in the Maya as well. So welcome to Cleo and Jo. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah. Okay, so let's dive in and we'll start with Cleo. And I would love to hear, Cleo, who are you and what do you do?
Who am I is the eternal question, no? I'm one spark of the universe traveling through life in this body and trying to make sense of it. I am a tantric body worker. Tantric teacher. I work with men mainly. So in the realms of sexuality and intimacy, my focus is on bringing people back into their body and reconnecting the cock and the heart. It's really beautiful.
Oh my goodness. You just reminded me then of a reel that I saw the other day that was it was a French guy saying that sometimes you just need to fuck us. You just need to fuck us. It was genius. Okay, Cleo, thank you so much. Okay, Jo.
So I'm Jo. I'm also a tantric body worker. I work with men and women and couples. And I think the underlying exploration within my work and with people is like dismantling shame to use sex as a place of empowerment and for pleasure. So that's really something that I feel passionate about, especially my upbringing around that was like quite heavy in the religious realm. So yeah, I'm here to like break down the barriers.
Amazing. Yeah, amazing. Yeah, so I met Jo through our mutual friend Shaft, who we've had on the podcast. Absolute legend in this world is Shaft, and so is Jo. So we got to meet, I think it was last year, we got to meet in person on New Year's Eve.
In Tulum.
We got to hang out in Tulum and just like vibe out on all things life, all money, all things sexuality, all things just living an epic all-out life. And we just, I remember like the first time we met, I was just like, let's just be friends forever. Just really feel that cosmic connection with you, Jo. And then I got to meet Cleo recently at the Austin Tantra Fest, which we were both facilitators. Same thing, just immediately like met in the presenter meeting before, and I was like, oh yeah, she's a vibe. And then Jo had already told me that her friend was going to be there, and then she's like, yeah, that's my friend. So it just felt like a whole thing. So
all connected.
So connected, and we just I just couldn't wait to all be kind of together. So thank you so much for being here. And the actual spark that created this podcast was around being a really sexy woman, like a really embodied sexy woman, teaching about sexual things, being very liberated, wearing all the sexy clothes, dancing beautifully sexy and going to temple parties, sex parties, all these things. And yet, often people think that we are the ones going around having having loads of sex with people. And actually, in my experience, it's absolutely the opposite. And actually, the discernment that a lot of us have and continue to have around our sexual energy, it can look one way, but it's actually very different. And I think people on the greater scale don't understand that being really sexually embodied is really for yourself, for your life, and then with who you choose to share it with. And it's not just that that's accessible to anyone. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, ladies.
Wow, there's so much. I just want to say, like, what you were talking about, the sex parties, like, because I host events at sex parties, and I hosted one recently, and I just had cuddles with this guy, and this guy actually questioned to me, "Do you not play at parties?" And I was just like, "No, I don't." I think for me, I just wanted to name the thing around, like, people think that sex parties is just a place that you go to have sex. And actually, my journey within the sex party realm and the sex party scene is that it means something completely different to me. Like, one, yeah, I'm facilitating, but two, it's a way to just fully be expressed. So like dancing in your underwear, connecting. I love just going for the hugs and for maybe some juicy kisses. And when a guy was really shocked and he was just like, "Are you not going to play?" And I was just like, "No, I'm not going to play." And like that kind of like discernment to be like, this is who I am. This is why I come to these spaces. This is like how I show up. I think there's a liberation in being able to hold and own your truth, because I think one of the problems is, especially around new women that come into the scene, is there's an expectation that because they're in a sex party space, that they have to play. You know, men approach them, they may be feeling a bit vulnerable or they're not sure what to do. And then there's an expectation that you have to like open up your sexuality. And I think it's really important that you said the word discernment, because I think when you are on this path around embodying your sexuality and understanding what that means to you, I think the more you come into alignment with your own truth and your own power, you learn to hold your sexual energy in a way that maybe you flow with that through dance, through movement, through conversation, through your creativity. And that for me within itself is so potent. And I think for me, that's what's really beautiful. And it can shock quite a lot of people when they're like, "Are you not going to play at the event?" And I was just like, what does playing really mean? You know, what, someone just like getting it on? Like, it has to be like penetrative sex. And Cleo was speaking before, which I think was really beautiful, around your experience, around something that you had, around your journey. Yeah, I think it'd be really beautiful to share what you shared with us just before the call, because it feels really potent.
Just before. All the juicy things.
And yeah, it was super juicy, but it was like, you know, the aliveness. I think when you start working and feeling the embodiment of your eroticism, it's way more expansive than just going to have sex at a sex party. And I think this is a very, interesting place to be in.
Yeah, and I love what you said, like, what is play? What does play mean? Like, why would play mean having an organ inside a hole and call it sex, you know? There's so many different ways to play and to have your sexual energy move through you and move you into the space. And for me, it's really about just attuning to my body, my sexuality, and how does it want to move in the space, with consent of the other people involved, if there are other people involved, of course. But sometimes it just means being on the couch and cuddling, and sometimes it just means being by myself and observing and feeling what's going on inside of me as I witness other people in the space. And sometimes it gets very sensual or energetic, like the experience I was mentioning before is I was like 2 weeks ago in this like big sex club in Berlin. It's called the Kit Kat. It's an amazing place, amazing maze. Lots of things happening there. And I ended up kind of like meeting this man who invited me into a dance, and we danced for hours. I think we were together for 5 or 6 hours of flow state, energetical sex through partner dance. There was so much communication between our own bodies. There was so much eros and pleasure and surrender. And yet there was not genital touch at any point. Like we danced for a few hours and then we kind of lie down for a few hours and we just kept dancing. Our bodies kept moving together, and there was so much sexual aliveness there. There was so much sexual energy running, yet there was no genital touch. There was no penetration. There was nothing that, you would think is sex, yet it was one of the most powerful experiences of my life. So I just want to state that, because it's important to open ourselves up to the plethora of experiences that are available to us with our human bodies. And as we are on the path of sexual expansion, liberation, and self-awareness, we're able to tap into all these different flavors of our sexuality.
Wow. I love that, Cleo. I was right there with you as you were explaining that. Then in my energy, I was just like, that's so good. Oh, yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I think there's so much in there. And I love what you were saying, Jo, about the creativity. And I really feel that an empowered, embodied sexual woman is just so creative. And that is why, actually, obviously, we all love the traditional, primal, regular sex, and yet there is just so much creativity available to us all of the time through our language. I remember, Cleo, when we first met and we were doing an exercise that we were just stood with each other and we had to talk about our life vision. And we were in a big room with hundreds of people, and everyone was just stood there, probably with their arms crossed or, chatting about their vision. And we were just like, oh, wow. And we were hardly even talking. We were just like full body, energetic, orgasming without touching at all. And just being in the full creative expression of our sexuality and our sexual energy. And everyone in the room was just kind of looking at us. This is what I mean. It's so creative, and that's why at a sex party, let's use that as an example. Of all of the sex parties that I've been to in my whole sex party career, let's call it, in 20 years of going to things, I have only ever had sex with my partner at one. I literally never ever have sex with anyone. And yet people are like, oh, she goes to all these sex parties, so she's obviously having sex. And I'm like, no. And yet even my friends who know me really well can be like, oh my God, you were going hard. And I can be completely in amongst it all. And it looks like I'm fully doing all the things, but I'm actually just being creative and playing in the shallow end, but it's very deep, So, yeah. And I love
that. The shallow end being deep. I love this.
I love that you brought in Kit Kat Club and this erotic dancing with the man. And actually, I remember when all this, when I first got into Tantra and conscious sexuality, because I've been going to sex parties way before, probably maybe have you two as well, been going to things with the drugs and the alcohol and not really understanding things. So for me, it was at the age of 30 when I moved to Bali and started to go to other kinds of more conscious events. And I was in a long-term relationship and that ended, and then I was single. And I was like, oh my God. And I had all this sexual energy. And actually what I used to do was go to contact dance. And I'd go to contact dance jams. And that, as somebody who it's, touch and movement and energy. Like pretty much a lot of my needs got fulfilled, clothes on, just dancing and exchanging sexual energy with people. Yes, it was with eros for sure, but it was, I would just leave feeling just so nourished and not even really even needing anything beyond that at that time. So yeah, I love that you brought this in with the man and the cuddling and the play. So good. So good. I need that right now.
And I love that, like, I love that you bring the contact dancing as well. Like, I had experiences in Bali with water contact dance, which was contact dance in a warm pool. And it was exactly this. It was like really allowing the energy to move us. And we were like melting with each other, like becoming one organism. And there was eros moving, but yet it was all, you know, we had bathing suits and there was no genital touch, but it was very like flowing with the energy. And when I think of like the sex parties environment, there is a reason why I go there and why we probably both go there as well. You know, like, why do we go to play parties if we don't play, as people say? And I was thinking about that, like, well, for me, these are really beautiful places of liberation. I love being there. I love sexuality. I love sexual energy, and I love being surrounded by it in a space where it's not repressed and where anything is possible, but nothing must. And what do I want to bring in this space? How do I want to evolve in this space? And I think it's just so beautiful to have those spaces available now in our society.
100%. When you were speaking, I was like, to be in spaces that are shame-free, when so many people have so much shame around sexuality. I mean, I get weird looks at the gym because I was on this TV program. This guy was doing a backstory of his life, and he's a sensual masseuse. And like, I didn't see his like cock or anything, but he got fully undressed. He was like pretending, or he was kind of like massaging me. And then people like still think, oh, I knew she was a kinky one because she was on that TV program with this guy who had his cock out. And I couldn't stop laughing because I just thought to myself, wow, people are so funny around sexuality and nudity. And I just think, to be in spaces where that's actually is embraced and welcomed, that people can dress however they want, they can do whatever they want. I mean, I just get off on someone blowing me, right? I just have orgasms, like, that is my thing. If someone blows on me, I'm like a full yes. Like, yeah, like that's my number one thing. So if you see me at a party, just blow on me.
I literally just got blown upon like 2 days ago.
Yeah, I love it.
Someone blowing on me. It's so good.
Yeah, and I think the thing is as well is, you know, I used to be in a part of my life where I was totally in the fucky energy, right? And I think it's also important to listen to your body, to have the awareness that if that is a state, which for me was quite, maybe I was in more of an immature state around my sexuality because I didn't really have that much of a great connection to my body. And I was like, I've got all this sexual energy, I just want to fuck. And then it gets to a point where something doesn't start to feel good or something shifts. And I think for me, the maturity around thinking, okay, something needs to change now, and I need to explore something different, and maybe my journey around sexuality is different. And this kind of goes back to the question around discernment, that I think the more sensitive I become with energy, which has been so integral with the work that I've been doing around energy, tantric body work, that it's made me more sensitive to my body, more aware of what my own body needs and my own needs. That for me, going from like this kind of like fucky energy into more like sensual depth and exploration and nourishment gives me way more than what that did. Because for me, fucky is just like goal orientated sex, you know, there's nothing there for around the exploration, around the journey. And I think when you get into the state and you start, like we've brought up around the kind of creatrix around sexuality, for me, this is the substance. this substance brings discernment because you've got more to feel, more to play with. You know, your direction isn't limited to one path. You're going to put your cock inside of me now and go orgasm, you know? It's like, let's have fun, baby. And then you like experience clitoral orgasms, cervical orgasms, energetic orgasms. And I'm like, my world feels bright, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Love that.
I love that you brought up this, like, you know, the different parts of your sexual journey, I think, you know, because that's what it is. It is a journey as we move through life and we evolve, and it's just so beautiful to see it unfold. And I think as a younger woman, I was always very sexually, like, awakened and natural in my sexuality, and sleeping with a lot of people when I was younger. And like Jo said, it was almost like that goal orientation. Okay, like I go to a party, I see this one hot guy, and then I make out with him, and then we have sex like the regular way. Okay. And like when I started to like develop self-awareness, self-development, I started to do meditation, be attuned to my body, I kind of cut off from all of that. And the Tantra path has been beautiful to connect me back to my body and what my body is actually able of, in terms of energy, in terms of different flavors of orgasms, in terms of different flavors of connection. It's like so incredible what it gives us, this work. It's magical. And recently I've also noticed like, okay, like for me, Tantra is really about allowing life to move through me and to guide me, and allowing my energy to guide me, of course, with discernment, but where does my energy wants to take me today? And so one day it might be like in a dance, energetical dance with this man and having energetical orgasms without touching each other. And then another day it might be like something more primal. And so what I want to say with that is that I felt like there needed to be on my side like an integration of my primal parts as well, and like an acceptance almost of the part of me that likes to fuck. And like, you know, like I just recently had this like, it's a bit of a juicy details here, but I had this experience.
We're here for it, babe.
Let's go.
We're available.
Popcorn ready.
Okay, so Cleo is in Berlin having the most crazy life. Like, it's so funny, the myriad of experiences that are happening right now, but like, we're here for it. And so as I move with my energy and through life in those very sexually charged spaces, like, the other day I was like in a space where I was feeling like really like in my dominant energy. And I was like, I want what I want, and I'm going to get you, and I'm going to get you. And then I had like this interaction with this man, and like, we kind of made out in the toilet, and then he was like, oh no, but I don't want to start playing in the toilet. And I was like, why not? Like, and I started to like really want that to happen somehow. And like, I was like, I wanted that very dark, like sex in the toilet kind of vibe. Like, let's go full Berlin style. and this guy didn't want it. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to take this other guy who's going to do it for me. And it was like a very primal experience, and very driven by like my desire and what I wanted to experience on the moment. And afterwards I was like, oh my God, this was like, it was not a tantric experience. It was not a spiritual experience. Like, I was very like in this like goal orientation, and I was almost feeling guilty about it. And I shared about it on Instagram actually. But then I realized like, okay, what does Tantra means for me? It means embracing all aspects of myself and all aspects of my sexuality and all aspects of life. And yesterday it looked like wanting to fuck in the toilets. And so like, how can we like integrate those parts of ourselves with love, with like loving presence, and also with joy and excitement for the beauty of life that's unfolding through us in all of the different types of experiences that we may have, and trying to not hierarchize our experiences, you know? And sure, like, when you feel 6 hours of energy orgasms, like, you kind of hierarchize it automatically. You're like, okay, I know that this is available, so suddenly like a regular orgasm from penetrative sex is pretty pale. But how can we observe them more as notes of a musical melody rather than a ladder almost that we have to climb? Does it make sense?
Love that.
100%.
Love that. Well bragged.
Yeah, I love it. And the thing that you said around Tantra and spirituality, it's like for me, like you are a living an embodiment tantrika. Like you bring your presence, your truth, your authenticity. If like 1 minute it's like let's fuck in the toilet, so then sex 6 hours. Now I've got sex on the brain. 6 hours of like energetic dance. Well, then it's same but different, you know? Like it's like your truth that you bring to in the moment of how your sexual expression wants to be expressed and liberated at that moment in time. You know, I had a similar experience this week where I had a very juicy makeout with this guy. You know, there was like 5 hours of sensual, exploration, lots of squirting, all the things that I love in terms of getting my juices flowing. And then like an hour later, I was just like, I actually just want you to fuck me, you know? And it was just like, for me, it's like, what feels really alive in my heart right now, and what is it that I need, you know? And that's not about bypassing or cutting things out just to try and get to the end goal, but it's like there's such a range of how our sexual energy wants to be expressed, and I think that is what we have to come back to at the time. It's not like, oh, I feel horny, so let me just like, I just need to fuck right now because I just need to get off and have an orgasm. Because sometimes when that happens in the middle of the day, it's like, actually, does this energy need to be fueled into my work, or is it because I actually need to sit and have like a self-pleasure thing? And it's like having the maturity to ask myself important questions around how does this sexual energy want to be moved helps me to always come from like my higher self or my higher consciousness as much as possible. You know, who knows who's coming in and out, but it's like, I think for me, it's always important around my sexual energy, because I have a lot of it, to ask myself important questions around sexuality. And then and then you just flow with it, you know? This whole thing around flowing with sexual energy really helps to then be like, I feel amazing. Like, I feel incredible. And then there's no shame there, you know, because I'm just living the fruits of the nourishment.
Oof. Love that with the fruits of the nourishment. Go on, Jo.
Fruits of the nourishment.
The fruits of the nourishment, baby. That's what we came for.
Yeah, because I was like, you know what? I had a PT session the next day and I was like, oh, my skin looks great. I'm glowing. And you know what I tell you? Baby. When you are fucked well as a woman, for me personally, I don't have Botox or any injectables, and I'm not against anybody who does that. So I just want to say that right up front. But my skin's glowing. I don't care about what weight I am. I just feel turned on as fuck. And I'm like, I feel so in my power that I'm like so unstoppable. And I'm like, this is why women need to be fucked well, and why we need to teach men about how to be present with a woman, give them the life skills that they need that we weren't taught at school. And I think this is like such important work that we're all doing that I think is well needed in this world. So, yeah.
Amen to that. Yeah. Amen. And I so feel that with both of you. Like, literally, whenever I see you pop up on my social media, I just feel this like, they're just so in their power. They're in their bodies. They're in their power. They're just doing it, and that can mean like a mirage of things, because you both show up so authentically. You both share when you're having a crappy day or when you don't feel great, but it's so truthful, it's so resonant that it just feels, to my system, it's like, you know, I can trust them, I can feel them, you know. So I just wanted to mirror that back. And there's, oh my God, there's so much juicy stuff in what you're saying. And what I'm seeing, like, I like to like listen to what everyone's saying and get like the overarching theme, and the theme that I'm feeling around all of our conversation right now, and that what I'm seeing is how approving we all are, how approving we are of each other, how approving we are of ourselves, how approving we are if it's this, how approving we are if it's the complete contradiction. And this is like a life skill, I would say, you know, approving of other people. And actually, a couple of nights ago, I was having a conversation with a man, and I used the term goddess, which it was because I was doing a photo shoot for like goddess wear. And then I was going to an event where it was like a goddess circle kind of thing. And honestly, that's not truly my language, but basically this man had a problem with that and was like, oh, that's profane. And I just really just listened to what he was saying and approved of it. I was like, I love that for you, if that's your belief. Like, I can totally expand to hold your belief around that. It's not necessarily mine. I didn't even share mine. I could just feel how disapproving he was. If it wasn't even of me, it was just of a word that I used. And I was like, wow, that is why there's war in the world. And I honestly think through this sexual exploration and this approving nature that we have, and, you know, obviously in the work that we all do, when we hear stories of people's sexual trauma and how it plays out and how it wild things that humans do to each other that are not very nice, and how we get to be so approving of all of it and help people to heal their relationship with their sexuality and their shame. And this is the path. So that's what I'm feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Ding dong is what I say to that. Approval, because you know what? It's so interesting. I feel like when we're not in approval of our sexuality, and when like shame comes up, then what we start to do, or what society starts to do, what I feel in like other people, is then they start to act out in their sexuality in the shadow. So everything that they're like are suppressed with, everything that they're hiding, you know. And I think, you know, I don't really want to get into like certain topics. I don't think maybe it's relevant here, but it's like people start to act out in their shadow, or they start to be dishonest around certain things. And it's just a shame, you know. I just feel like, oh, my heart just sinks, because I'm like, there's another way. Like, when you are honest and you're in approval around your sexuality, like, the world opens up like 10,000 million thousand doors that, you know, if I was in shame around my sexuality, I wouldn't be able to have multiple orgasms at once, you know, on a simple equation, you know. And I just think it's almost like saying I can only get an orgasm if I use a vibrator, you know. I think how limiting is that? And there's an issue there around people not being able to fully surrender. They're not trusting their own bodies, you know, and they're using this thing as a way to feel something when they naturally just can't surrender and do that. And for me, there's shame and control within that, underlying those things. And yeah, very interesting. I think getting approval of your sexuality and be a multi-orgasmic woman. That's literally the key to life.
Yeah. And Jo, I think that's really interesting, because you just said, you know, when people have all this shame and, oh my God, that so used to be me. I was the one having one orgasm off a vibrator that lasted 2 seconds. That was me for many years. And yeah, like you just said, when people feel shame, it's a shame.
Yeah.
Don't you think that's like interesting word?
Yeah.
I'm like, wow, I've never thought of that before, but it is a shame that we have shame.
It is a shame that we have shame. But shame is such an interesting thing to explore. And like the tantric work is a lot linked to integrating our shadows as well, and like bringing them into light and owning them as well. And with that comes a lot of working through shame. I think sexuality and shame are so connected in our society, right? It's huge. And I've been like contemplating shame a bunch, right, in my own journey and in the journey that I go through with my work. And shame comes from the fear of loss of connection. It's like we are afraid of losing connection and dying, basically. As a social species, connection is super important. And so the idea of doing something that other people are going to judge and then like withdraw their love for us, from us, because of this thing, makes us not want to do that thing or not want to own that thing, because we'd rather have love and connection. And so when we realize that, we can have like a bit more grace with ourselves, like, okay, it's okay that I'm feeling shame. Like, it's normal that I'm feeling shame. And how do I move through that? How is that serving me or not serving me, you know?
Yeah. I really get that. I'm feeling called to ask you both a juicy question. If you want to reveal something around what was the thing that you felt the deepest shame for the longest time that now you've been able to integrate and use as...
I've got this. The question actually came, the answer came to me before you even asked me the question, which was super interesting. It's when I was slut shamed by my mum. I was slut shamed by my mum. I was going to see a man, and I went out the house without a bra on, and she called me a slag. And I just went, oof. And like, I felt it in my body, and I felt so contracted around my breasts being able to be how they wanted to be in my own clothes. And yet that was a problem. Like, that was my mum's projection. Like, that was her shame projected onto me. And I held that for such a long time in my body. That was probably one of the biggest things that I didn't know until a couple of years ago that I've actually been working through. And that was a point where I'd only, this was in my 20s, where I only really had sex when I was like drinking alcohol or I was under the influence of whatever I was doing at that time. And I think that shame brought up such a huge barrier in terms of authentic connection, not only to my own sexuality, but how that looked like in relationships with men, that it was then when I went on my path 10 years ago that I learned that actually I can have sexual connection without alcohol. But that was a huge one around like my body. And that's why I used to wear like really baggy clothes, because I thought if I wear anything tight fitting, I'm going to get like slut shamed and, and all the things that I wanted to feel connected to my own femininity, I was often shamed around, and I had shame for that. And that has probably been, one of my biggest teachers really is shame. And that's why I love to work with it with others, just because I know how limiting it was in all of my sexual experiences. With other people. So like that was a huge one. And it's still like when I think of it, like it really gets me in my heart every time, and it makes me feel sad because I know that I'm not the only one, and there's this little girl inside that's like, oh, you're okay. But I just, and I think that's when probably at that point I turned completely the opposite way, went into like this sex cult community and explored my sexuality to a point where I just didn't give a shit, because I wanted to feel this liberation, but I actually didn't know how to do it in a safe way. And so I went into this sex cult, went fully out, and then with like trainings and mentorship and other things like that, I kind of went back onto, a place where it feels safe, where I have a lot more safety within my sexuality. So that's for me what came up.
Thank you for sharing that, Jo. I think I'm so glad. No, I'm not glad that happened to you, but I am glad that you've integrated it and that you can share it so vulnerably, because I know so many women with this exact same thing, so I'm really, really, really glad that you shared that. And I feel so so sad for that version of you that got slut shamed for nature, essentially, and projected on it. We don't know the difference. So thank you for sharing that. I'm also like, are you available to say what the sex cult was?
I think you know what it is. It's like it got
Tell us.
Well, it got brought down by the FBI in America. It was orgasmic meditation.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah, and it was all about like freeing your sexuality. You know, like, I mean, the one good thing that I love about the practice, not about the teachings, because there's loads of stuff going on about them at the moment still in America, and yeah, maybe this main woman will go to prison, who knows, but you know, the practice itself is really beautiful in terms of being able to discover more about your sexual energy. But I will say the other thing that it did lack is actually how to and I think a lot of people are not aware of this, and going back to the whole sex party, like you open up your sexuality and then it's like, what do you do with it? You know, our sexuality is our most powerful life force. And if people do not have the skills and tools to integrate that and to know the difference around how that feels within your body and how it wants to be expressed in a safe way, it can actually be quite dangerous. You know, you can get yourself into situations that you don't necessarily want to be in. And that's the whole thing around having discernment around your sexuality and knowing what's a yes in your body and what's a no in your body. So when I was in this community, everything was a yes. My sexual energy is on fire. I've got all of these desires. Threesomes, foursomes, let's go for it. I was like, bring it on, basically, which was, it felt very liberating, but it was a very immature part of my sexual expression. But I needed to go through that to understand what maturity feels like, you know? And it feels very different, just like you. I go into scenes and I'm like, I love being where people are just doing what they want to do. And I feel liberated just being in sex positive scenes now. But yeah, that's my little story.
Okay. So for our listeners, if you don't know what orgasmic meditation is, or I would say don't go watch the Netflix documentary, because there is a Netflix documentary on it. I have watched it. Maybe you two have as well.
Yeah.
And I also know so many people that were really, really deep in that and lived on the land and were in it from the start, and teachers within it and enrollers within it. And I'm also trained in it as well. And so it's actually it's a process, very like structured process, where the man or the stroker strokes the clitoris for an amount of time, and then it closes. So there's so much more I could say about this, but that's what orgasmic meditation is. And it's a lot about women shifting into asking what they want and kind of adjusting the man, and the man being out of his ego and just being there in service with the woman, to the woman's desire. And yeah, I agree. It's like a stepping stone in the way, on the path. And also I do think it's weird, because, you know, a lot of, probably all of our explorations is moving away from clitoral orgasms, because the deeper, more like life-changing, soul-shattering, soul-creating orgasms are all deeply in the vagina usually. So the just focusing all of the attention on the clitoris is also an interesting situation, I would say.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now we've cleared that one out.
Oh, and the other thing is that Jo mentioned when I'm in a scene, and just for anyone listening who doesn't know what that is yet, a scene. Do you want to explain what that is, Jo?
Well, I just meant being in a sex positive scene. So if the scene's going around where people are exploring different types of sex, so it could be like kink or BDSM or just like different types of sex. It just, for me, I think it feels more like, I think what I was referring to is being in a sex positive space where people are exploring their sex. That could be through kink, BDSM, sensual play, penetrative sex, like anything like that. I mean, it lights up my heart, actually, that there are safe places that people can just express themselves that way. Yeah.
Great. Thank you for that. Okay, Cleo, so my original question was around what was shame in your life for a long time that you've now integrated?
Yeah. You know, I think there is like always different layers that come through our life to be resolved when we're ready for them. I've had things happen in my teenage years and that have been resolved, but I felt like called to sharing something else. So like when I stepped into the dancing part of my life, so I danced in clubs, that was really for me like re-owning my sexual expression, my sensual expression, in full vision of, you know, like on a stage basically, which was very liberating. And it was amazing. But at the same time, as I moved through that, like, and I started working with men and I started to feel like the depth of this work and my calling for it and like the true soul desire of doing this work and working in the realms of sexuality with men. And as I did that, in my dating life, that started to become an issue a little bit. And I remember clearly this one man I was dating, and it's still like, it was like a bit sad because there was like a point where we were really like getting along and it was beautiful. And then there was the point of like, well, what am I gonna tell my parents that you do? I could never tell my parents what you do. I would be too ashamed of this. This man already like had done similar work than I did, had probably his own issues regarding his own shame regarding what he has done. But the reason why it touched me, I believe, is because there was some shame in myself. I was shaming also myself for the work that I was doing. And I think you can only really agree with someone and it can only really touch you so far as you agree with it. And so that really made me look deeply at myself of like, oh, there's still a part of me that's ashamed of the work that I do. And I think for like all of us working into these realms, I'm sure you had experiences like, you know, going public with this work, facing the world as this woman that you are and owning it. And, you know, in a lot of contexts, it's not very well regarded because there is a lot of judgments that come. There is a lot of preconceived ideas of what it means to do this work. And so, you know, working as a tantric body worker is considered sex work because we work with sex. And so people make assumptions about this. And so I had to really look at the shame in the eyes and I had to sit with it and sit with what it meant if I kept going with that path. And was I willing to risk it all? Was I willing to keep going and to follow what felt like my heart's truth, even if it meant I was losing some people like this man? And that was a really hard thing to do. But I went through it and I moved through it and I integrated that shame as well. I realized, okay, like this is not mine to carry. This is a result of the conditioning that we hold as a society of what it means to do this work. There used to be a time where this work was celebrated, where priestesses were the elite of society, where people would go into these temples and get worshipped and do all kinds of erotic rituals, and it was accepted in society. So at some point in time, this changed. And so this means nothing about the work itself, about us, ourselves as humans and as women doing this work. It just shows different of layers of conditioning in society. So how can we unfold that, like detangle ourselves from that so that we can really step into what we are here to do?
Thank you for sharing that, Cleo. Yeah, that really resonates as well. Of course, you know, like coming out of the closet of doing these things it's just, you know, we get back, it backfires from all angles. And yeah, I love that you brought in that it mirrored to you that you had your own shame and you got to face off with it and then make that powerful choice and step into it boldly. And I'm curious, does it still come up or is it done?
You know, like there's still some residues sometimes, like when I'm about to go online and I'm like, ooh, I'm going to be seen, you know, or like, oh, what if someone from my family says that? But like, and the thing is that now I have tools, like the tools that I teach are the tools that I use. Like, how can we move through life with all parts of ourselves and understanding that they are just protectors? Like, the shame is ultimately a protector. They want to keep us loved and safe. And so how can I hold that shame and not trying to get rid of it, but be like, okay, it's there and it doesn't have to run the show.
Yeah. It's really reminding me of just like trends and rhythms in life. Remember when like being a size 0 and wearing jeans down on your hips like a Spice Girl or like Victoria Beckham when having no bum, and that was the fashion, and like really thin eyebrows. And now, of course, it's all of, well, Jo knows, it's all about pumping that booty in the gym.
It's all about the peach, babes. I love it. Now I'm like, I think my bum's too big for this dress, but in a good way. I do love it. I do love it. I do, but I am more into the curve, because if you think about it, like sexual energy goes like this, you know, like orgasmic energy goes in waves. Our body is in waves. It's curvaceous. We're just mirroring nature. We're not working against it anymore. And I think that's really beautiful. Like, yeah, we may want to enhance our curves, our bum, and do these beautiful, you know, workouts for our body. But we're actually just enhancing and making room for more of our sexual energy to flow through our bodies. You know, the whole movement around the twerking, the releasing of like the first and second lower chakras, energy centers. It's like we're helping actually energy to move, which I think is really beautiful. People are actually going into this trend, probably not consciously knowing what it's doing, but they're actually allowing, or people, whether they're conscious to it or not, they're actually allowing the sexual energy to move more freely within their bodies. And I'm just like, how fantastic is that? You know, we're actually slowly, whether we're doing the work or not, we're actually working more with nature and our sexual energy, whether it's through dance, building your bum, doing the twerk class, you know. It's great. I'm all for it.
I love this because it's like exactly what you said, like Gina, it's like we have trends, and I love how you brought that. It's trends in our society that make us move as a species, right? And I think it's very interesting that the trend is now that, because I believe we are moving towards more awakening, and sexual awakening is a massive part of it, if not the base of it all. And so it's so interesting to look at the bigger picture and see us like move and do the twerking and awaken our sexual energy, and Tantra is becoming this massive thing now. And, you know, we are awakening as a species and raising our consciousness.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. These trends, and it's also like, we're all in business. And a few years ago, like being a boss babe was like the ultimate thing. And now it's, you know, there's like the trad wife thing coming in. Everyone's making sourdough. And then there's like this kind of
I didn't even know that was a
balance.
thing. I'm so out of the trends. I'm just in the beauty trend, babe.
I don't know about the sourdough trend either.
No? Wait, did the sourdough trend? You didn't hear about the sourdough trend?
No.
I mean, I love sourdough.
It's 11/11, and you were finding out about Tradwife, which, you know about Tradwife?
No.
Oh my God, why is my algorithm teaching me about Tradwife? Probably because I am one. So it's all about the pendulum swing from boss babe, which is like go, scale, independent, kind of maiden, let's go, into the complete polar opposite, which is like living on the land, raising chickens, having sourdough, like being completely provided for, like a traditional wife. And making everything from scratch, literally, even the flour that you make the flipping sourdough out of.
Grind.
I love that neither of you know about this.
For me, I'm like in the middle. I want to be the tantric boss bitch. I am the tantric boss bitch, but I also love the nurturing part of myself that loves cooking stuff from scratch, but it's just like I don't need to devote all of my time and attention to that, you know? So it's like for me, having that happy medium of like, I want it all, babes. I literally want it all.
I love this.
So it is.
And I think it's like the natural thing that happens is like when we go to an extreme, like the pendulum goes to the opposite extreme straight away, and then we come into a state of balance a bit more.
Yes. Exactly. And this brings us on to something that we spoke about in our pre-game, in our foreplay chat about sometimes there's celibacy. Like, you know, when you have a breakup or something, you finish a container with someone and sometimes you're like, okay, celibate, completely celibate, not even like going to text anyone. And then the flip of that is like slut phase, we'll call it, where it's just like, I'm just out there doing all the things all the time with all the people and all the threesomes and foursomes and temple parties and all the things. And then there's that happy medium pendulum swing, you know? And what I'm saying here is we approve of it all, and it's whatever is the flow. None of it is wrong.
Yes.
I agree. And I am in approval of everything. And then I also feel there is also the possibility to ask yourself, if you are in the extreme of one, are you in avoidance of something? Because that can also be a comfort spot. You know, it's always like having sex the same way, having the type of sexual experiences. Is there something that we're avoiding in terms of like being vulnerable and opening up? Because I tell you something, I would never, a few years ago, have had foreplay for like 4 hours straight. I'd be like, oh my God, I just need to get the cock inside of me and bam, bam, bam. Do you know what I mean? But now I'm just like, I love the foreplay. I was like, get down there. You know, I love my whole body to be explored. And foreplay is not just obviously about genital, oral, you know, oral sex, but it's like having my whole body adored and worshipped. Is like, fucking hell. Like, if people got taught this early on at school, like, I honestly feel like this practice alone would bring people more into their bodies, that people would like have a different type of sensitivity and intuition and joy. And I just think it's so beautiful. It's so beautiful that you can have a hip orgasm. So beautiful that you can have a breast orgasm. You know, there's all these different types of pockets of joy within your body that I think let's just explore. You know, so I think the whole thing about the pendulum thing, I'm in approval for it. But then I also think if we're stuck in that, you know, pendulum, sourdough, bread girl for life, I'm like, I just like, for me, I would be bored of a bread girl. Do you know what I mean? And I'm not a bread girl, but I'm just like, you know, it's quite monotonous, if that's the word. I don't know what that word is, but you know, it's like very samey. I need variety. I thrive on variety. And although I'm in approval for it, I'm just like, they're both interesting practices. Yeah, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But I think wherever you are on that pendulum thing, it's like, am I growing? Am I thriving? Like, what's going on here? You know, is my heart still alive? And if you're a bread girl and your heart's alive after 10 years, go girl.
Get it.
I've got a vision of you, Jo, with like your sexy gym gear on and a pinafore, kneading bread, but like,
oh my God, yes.
So, you know, Chef calls me the Nigella Lawson of Tantra.
You actually are. That's brilliant.
I love this.
Okay, I have a final question for you, should you wish to answer it. And that is around your relationship to God and sex. So your relationship to God, but obviously it's going to include sex.
Should I go? You know,
It's such a juicy question.
that is a very juicy question. I find God through my aliveness. So whatever that's happening, whether I'm screaming or being quiet, God is here. You know, it's like, am I connected to my heart, my soul, and my pussy? Like, and when I can just feel that alignment in my body, I know that I'm connected to God. And like, for me, anything can happen, anything can evolve, anything can like create from that place of like alignment and embodiment. I think really is my connection to God in that place. Yeah. There's that whole thing about like, you know, being fucked open to life. And I think I often feel about that question in relationship to like God and sex and stuff. And it's like, you know, is this thing, whatever I'm doing, whether I'm writing a practice for my client, whether you know, someone's sucking my breast, like, do I feel alive right now? And if I'm feeling alive in that moment in time, like, I know that I'm connected to God. Like, God is my aliveness. So I think for me, that's the whole thing around sexuality and spirituality, is tapping into that life force energy as a way for like power, pleasure, and purpose.
Love that. Love that. Thank you.
So
Miss
beautiful.
Cleo.
Okay, so if I go back to like the beginning of my life, I grew up in a Muslim family, but not super religious, right? But still, like, we would do some prayers, and like my grandmother was doing the Ramadan and everything. Then I went to a Catholic school, and so I went to church at school, and so there was always this kind of like all different religions in my life. And all of it was telling me that God was outside of me. It was something that you pray to, and it's something that's like this man in the sky with a beard, and it's like this things that separate from me almost. And then I went into like being full atheist, just I only believe in science, and was just living my life this way. And then I went on the self-development path with yoga, meditation, and I was accessing like these deeper states of consciousness. And I started to feel oneness. Like, I cannot describe it. I just felt it. It was like I was everything and nothing at the same time. Everything was us moving together. And so that's where I really understood God, I think, what it means to me now. And God, the goddess, the source, the universe, the divine, there's so many words for it. There's a Queen Herbie said that it's like everyone argue about its name, but no one argue about its existence. And so we can all have our own relationship with it, and it doesn't really matter. It's about like finding your truth in it. Now, relating to sex, for me, sex is a portal to the divine. Sex is what created us as human beings. Two people had sex. They had desire for one another. They had sexual energy moving through their body. They met. They had beautiful lovemaking, and sometimes not beautiful lovemaking, whatever, but it was sex. And that energy created another human being. And if we want to go spiritual, like that force brought a soul into this body. And so sex is for me the bridge between the spiritual, the ethereal, and the material, and the density of our bodies. So that's like really the portal where our soul comes into these bodies. And the thing with sacred sexuality, when we start to explore sexuality in a sacred, conscious way, and with the appreciation of the power that it holds into creating human beings and bringing souls into this world, we are able to tap back into what it means to be God, what it means to be everything, what it means to be the divine, and what does it feel inside of us. And so with practices, like the tantric practices for me have helped tremendously, because they've brought me back to my body, to a meditative state while I was having sex. And then I was able to feel that oneness and let that oneness move through me. Yeah, I guess that's what I have for this question.
Juicy.
Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
I love it. I love it. I love it.
What about you, Gina?
Yeah. Well, I really resonate with what you're both saying for sure. I have found God in many places. I think like initially I would call that the universe, I would call it the universe, and I would see this in like the magic and the synchronicities and the things that you cannot explain, like how absolutely divine they are. And even just like in nature, in a flower, in the way things are, that's where I first started to experience it. And then through plant medicine, going on the plant medicine journey and seeing that we literally are all one. Like this mango in my hand is literally God, and I can eat it and it becomes me, and like we're all one. That rock is God, like it's all nature, it's all God, and we're nature. And then going into the sacred sexuality space and actually almost experiencing sex as a way to transcend, as a way to grow my consciousness and our consciousness, and starting to believe that what the planet needs is incredibly well fucked people. Like if people are well fucked, they're not at war. And I especially with my long-term partner, like our sex, literally from the very first time we ever did that, is and was a portal to the divine. Like it's just something else that opens up, and it's not even sex, like it's not even physical at this point. It's just this portal in the chemistry that opens to bigger things. And actually a lot of the things that I've done in my life, like writing a book, or a lot of the things I've created, have come from that specific portal where I've just been like, whoa. And that to me is God. And now it's interesting. Yeah, I'm kind of like in a new exploration around, a lot of people have gone to like this new Jesus thing where they're like renouncing being a sex coach and renouncing everything, renouncing tarot cards and saying that meditation is Satan, and like all these really intense things. I've spoken about it on the podcast before. And so I've really been in the deliberation of it all again, of like, what is true to me now? And I feel I'm still in that, honestly. And I feel like my whole message is becoming another level of holy. And that doesn't mean that I'm not going to be talking about kink and sexy things and all my sexual innuendos anymore. No, because I feel like that is all part of it. But I feel like I'm expanding into something new that I'm not quite there with God and with sex and with holiness, and something is coming, excuse the pun.
Juicy. I'm like teased up now. Like what's coming? I love what you shared here, and I would love to hear more about what you mentioned with like the Jesus thing and people denunciating their work in the sexuality field. I think I've seen a bit of that, but I would love to hear more.
Yeah, I spoke all about it on the podcast too before. I went in depth with my friend Lara, but I can also tell you after. But it's a really, really interesting time. A lot of people getting baptized and like wearing modest clothing, and also not wanting to be friends with people like me anymore. Just like no, which has been really painful. Anyway, so is there anything else you want to add? And also, we'll put it all in the show notes, but what have you got at the moment that people can buy and get in there with you?
Just one point I just want to bring up on that whole religious thing is it's so interesting that you asked that question about spirit, God, and sexuality, and how Cleo and how we've all said this thing about oneness. And then it's interesting that people go into this like religious sector, let's just call it, or kind of, for me, it's like a different type of cult. And it's like, for me, people that think that they're getting closer to God in that religious sense feels more like separation. And it goes against everything in terms of like what oneness and connection and God and really allowing that. And it's like, they change the way that they dress, they start to separate people out. And I just, it's a very interesting topic to come to when people are thinking about spirituality and sexuality around oneness. Because for me, if we're in separation, then there's actually shame that's come up. And it goes back to what we spoke about early on. And I think it's a very important question. Like, am I separating myself off to life through my sexuality, or am I connecting more to life? And I think if we start to ask more important questions to ourselves, then actually we can discover more and open up about our sexuality and how it wants to connect. I think there's more important questions to ask ourselves in that kind of, in that kind of aspect of thing. But I feel like I just needed to say that. Thank you.
Glad you did.
And what I think is like also like Christ consciousness is really coming back, right? Magdalene consciousness is coming, like it's at a whole time high right now. And there might be at some point like a moment where some people are missing the point, maybe, like, and it's not a judgmental thing that I say, but when it goes into separation, like what just said, it's like, are we really in Christ consciousness when we're into separation? And what is that about? Why are we going back to the biblical? Christ consciousness is a consciousness, and it's there to teach us things. And why do we have to associate it with one particular tradition? It's all the same. It's all leading us back to the same place. All roads lead to Rome. And
Right.
And Jesus is the big connector, bringing everyone together, and with the bread and fish and wine, and
the bread, sourdough.
The sourdough.
Let's get the sourdough and the kombucha.
Sourdough.
I love the kombucha and I love the sourdough, but I don't make either. I just let my tantric money by it.
Oh my God, that was funny. Love that. Love it. Okay, where can they find you?
So they can find me on Instagram at the Tantric Woman, and my website is, I think, thetantricwoman.com. So I have a website with all of my juicy offerings for men, women, couples, retreats I'm doing. Or you can just follow me on the gram for any juicy updates, pussy shares, sex shares, like whatever feels alive to me in that moment, then you can, follow me there and reach out to me. Yeah.
Fabulous. Amazing. And Cleo.
So my name is the Tantric Muse, and actually I love this because that's how we met with Jo. She was the Tantric Woman and I was the Tantric Muse, and I don't remember who reached out to who, but we reached out to each other and we started chatting when I was on the other side of the world, and it was like an instant friendship. And that's just like a beautiful like witnessing of like how can we as women collaborate and empower each other, and rather than try to compete, oh my God, we have the same name, we have the same work, and straight away be in competition or judgment towards each other. I felt like Jo did like such a beautiful job at like celebrating me, and I believe I did the same, and so that allowed us to really create that friendship, and I'm super grateful for it. So thank you.
That's because she's well fucked.
You share the love when you're well fucked. You're not tight
exactly.
and constricted.
Exactly. Yeah. So the Tantric Muse, my website is thetantricmuse.com. I work online and in person all over the world. I do coaching packages, sex coaching. I work primarily with men, sometimes with couples, and I organize worldwide luxurious Tantra retreats. One-on-one, we go deep and we explore juicy things.
Wow. I want to do one. Well, I love you both so much. This was great and it left me wanting more. So I want to be in person with you both. That's my desire. At some stage, whenever that may be.
We make our own Tantra retreat.
I'm putting that into the ethers right now. That will be so fun.
Yes.
So thank you both so much for all of your wisdom and vibes and hilariousness and beauty and empowerment. And thank you for every single decision and portal that you've been through and flipping leap that you've taken to get you to where you are, to be the women you are today. And I'm so grateful you got to be on the G-Spot podcast with us.
Thank you.
Bye, babe.
Thank you for tuning in to the G-Spot podcast, where pleasure meets purpose. If you loved this episode, don't forget to hit subscribe and send it to a friend who you know will love it too. Until next time, stay turned on. With love, Gina.